As you heard, I'm the astronaut Wrangler. I work with several astronauts. I've been very privileged to have been in space for quite a while. I'm in deep space now. I am not escaping. And I'm very proud to work with Dr. Cyan Proctor, Nicole STOTT, who I think might be somewhere, hopefully pretty soon, and Jancy McPhee. So Dr. Jancy McPhee is a neuroscientist by training and works in the NASA Human Research Program on science strategies across biological systems, missions, and international and domestic partners. Since 2010, she's worked to find motivating and novel ways to enhance space education, foster science and technology innovation, and promote global collaboration to solve hard challenges. Through her nonprofit SciArt Exchange and the Humans in Space Art program, she offers global STEAM-based training to inspire and prepare the world for the future. I'm going to let Dr. McPhee give a presentation and explain what she does and how what she does relates to art and music and space. Dr. McPhee?
Thank you so much. Can I have a thumbs up about whether you can hear me? Yay, love the thumbs up. So really sorry not to be there in person. I am very fond of everybody that's on this panel, and I'm very excited to participate in whatever way I can. Thanks also, Christina, for letting me kick off, because I think some of the things I'm going to talk about may have some relevance with Nicole and Cyan as well. So next slide, please. So the first thing to realize, as Christina already told you, is that I am a scientist. So I was very lucky to have great public schools as a kid who taught me to love science, but I also grew up in a home full of literature and art, and all my hobbies were music and theater. So when it came time for me to decide what I wanted to do when I grew up, I decided to become a scientist, but I focused my field of science on the biology of thoughts, emotion, movement, and creativity. So I became a cellular and molecular neuroscientist and was in the laboratory for 17 years. Then, as Christina mentioned, I moved to work in NASA Space Life Sciences, and I'm currently in the Human Research Program. And as you heard from my colleague earlier today, we focus on keeping the astronauts healthy and able to perform in space, and focusing on the risks to the human body and their behavior caused by the hazards of the space environment. Next slide, please. What's really awesome and fascinating about this pivotal period in space exploration is that access to space is really beginning to open up to more and different kinds of people, and commercial space companies are offering an even broader sector of humanity beyond the typical astronaut the chance to fly in space as tourists, manufacturers, and researchers. And so it's extra critical for all of us to let people around the world know what's happening in space and the opportunities ahead, including the fact that we are absolutely going to explore Mars. Next slide, please. So I already mentioned that I work on the challenges in science and technology, but it takes a whole lot more to get to Mars. There are challenges in just about every sector. And some of the key elements that help us to overcome those challenges are communication, collaboration, and creativity. So we're going to need to be able to relay the exciting story of the future, but we're also going to need to be able to work well together to solve the problems ahead, and work it with a diverse group of people to solve those problems. Next slide. One of the key aspects of communication is not just to tell people the facts, but to tell them why they should care about it and how something is important. And that allows for greater understanding. Next slide. And naturally, communication is very much at the basis of teamwork, but it takes more than just communication to have an effective team. You need to know how to work with people who are different from you and who think differently from you. Next slide. And of course, those problems, those challenges that we talked about require creativity to solve them. And from neuroscience and psychology, we know that in a very simple way, a creative idea is one where you connect two aspects of your knowledge and experience base and then test the resulting idea against reality to see if it's value added. And the requirements to generate a creative idea are that you have a broad knowledge and experience base, an open and imaginative approach, including the ability to approach problems in different ways. And you better be motivated, because being creative is super hard. Next slide. So we're here to talk about art. And let's try to remember that we mean all the forms of art: film, music, visual art, literature. But in a two-dimensional slideshow, I can only really show you visual art. So we already know how professional storytelling is amazing and can really talk to us about space and science and technology, and the different multimedia formats I talked about affect us in multisensory ways. They relay the passion of what we're doing, the why, and they can even present concepts before they're real. Next slide, please. They can also provide us with role models and heroes that help us to envision our role in this future in space exploration. And you can see I'm dating myself here, but I'm also telling you a little bit about my personal inspiration. Next slide, please. And the beauty of art and a series of art is that it can tell a story from past to future. And you can see just in these three simple images, we are telling the story of the past Apollo boot prints on the moon, which we all know were male, and then our hope in the near future that the next boot prints will be female. And then from there, we have men and women progressing from the moon to Mars. Next slide, please. And I think this was mentioned just a few minutes ago, but we also have to appreciate that we get better science and technology by integrating the arts. We already have lots of examples where diverse teams of artists and scientists have shared their technology, borrowed approaches from each other, worked together to create amazing advances. And also, it's important to realize that many of the people that we consider the most creative problem solvers, like Nobel laureates, are also known to be active practitioners in the arts. Next slide. So my personal experience in the sciences and the arts, and my appreciation that we have some great challenges ahead and a couple of important things to evolve and develop, led me to found the nonprofit SciArt Exchange. And it focuses on those three concepts that I believe are very important for the future of space exploration and getting us to Mars: communication, creativity, and teamwork. And then the ultimate vision of the nonprofit is to inspire the future of space exploration and also to prepare us and convene us to solve the grand challenges ahead. Next slide, please. Those of you who know of us have heard of our Humans in Space art program, where we host international online multimedia art contests for children, early career professionals, and professional artists and scientists. We invite them to learn about space exploration and the underlying challenges that need to be solved. And then they relay their visions of the future through visual, literary, musical, and video artwork. Next slide. We then weave all the best multimedia art received from the contest into displays and live performances, online, in space, and locally worldwide, to now have a snowball effect where we engage listeners and viewers as well, and begin a global dialogue about the future, get more people aware and interested in contributing to space exploration to get ourselves to Mars through the power of the arts. Next slide. Just to give you a couple of examples, these are from our youth art competition. Again, it's only the visual artwork. You have to look at my piano and imagine that you're hearing the music that these young people are creating. But through this work, the young people are relaying messages about the importance and the process and the impacts of space exploration and the benefits back to Earth. Next slide. And just as a topical example of artwork that we can get from adults, this is from the Project Mars film and poster competition. And we see that this visual art is relaying messages about why we explore space, the possibilities of a new space economy, the shared hope that we do this together, and the totally mind-blowing concept of taking the ultimate selfie on Mars. And I'm not going to go into detail, but I believe some of my colleagues will talk a little bit more about how space exploration really does bring benefits to Earth, including a lot of aspects of healing and inspiration and personal growth. So I'll leave that to Nicole in particular to talk about. Next slide, please. And with the help of a lot of volunteers and sponsors over the year, we have been able to impact many participants and had lots of people experience this artwork about space exploration. And we really hope to be able to reach out more and more and to have a greater impact and really reach out to different kinds of people going forward. And this is the last slide. Next one, please. So just to summarize, we think that art can really help get people excited and feeling invited into our future exploring Mars. And it can also help us to prepare and work together to solve the challenges ahead and get us to Mars. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jancy. All right, next we have my friend and partner in purpose, Nicole STOTT, who is home in St. Pete with her in her office that I have seen many, many times this week. Nicole calls herself a NASA astronaut, artist, Earthling, author, and mom. She spent 104 days in space at the ISS, 18 days underwater. She's the 10th woman to conduct a spacewalk. And since leaving NASA, she founded the Space for Art Foundation, where she leads art projects with kids in hospitals and refugee centers all over the world, using the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. My friend, Nicole STOTT.
Well, I'll tell you, it's really great to be here with all of you. And as Christina mentioned in the beginning, and I think Jancy followed, these are four, well, I include myself, I guess, here with three of my very favorite Earthlings. I'm thankful to follow Jancy's presentation in that the two of us go way back as well. I'm really proud to be, I think, one of the founding board members for SciArt Exchange. And I remember many creative, inspirational, and perhaps frustrated conversations in my office while I was still with NASA at Johnson Space Center. But it's incredible to me to see where Jancy and her team have brought the Humans in Space art competition, and also all of the other projects that she didn't necessarily get a chance to talk about. But it's really incredible to see how, I don't know, I think something like this, I'm so happy we're having this conversation, because I think SciArt Exchange beautifully represents how this integration of science and art really puts us in the best position to do challenging things, not just to get to Mars, to settle Mars, to live and work there, but to bring back some of those solutions to Earth to help solve the problems here. And just looking creatively seems to be the best way to do that. And so I'm very thankful that Jancy's here. I look forward to hearing what Sian has to say, because I love the work that she's been doing. Followed along with the last panel session, and a lot of those little tidbits of goodness came out in that session as well. And of course, as Christina mentioned, I love this idea of partner in purpose. I actually consider all four of us to be in that mode of operation when it comes to what you see on her really beautiful t-shirt, which is Space for a Better World. I think that's what it comes down to in the end. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be presenting anything or just chitty chat and rambling like this.
You do have one slide that has like a little video.
Okay, all right. Why don't we just show that, and then I can hush after that.
So there's a little video if you guys want to play that in the upper part of the slide. Whoever is controlling the screen.
And I'll just say, this is, I think my invitation to participate in this panel really started with the opportunity I had to paint while I was in space during my first space flight, and to bring what I like to think of as the human to human space flight. And we've been doing that since the very beginning of Humans in Space. I think we can go back and look probably the farthest back to Alexei Leonov with colored pencils, sketching orbital sunrises and sunsets. And then later during that historic, iconic, I would say, Apollo-Soyuz mission, he did pencil portraits of all his crewmates. And then that, that followed with music and poetry, and my friend Karen Nyberg quilted while she was on station. Cyan painted while she was in space as well. One of her crewmates played the ukulele while he was there. I mean, there are jam sessions going on the space station all the time, I know that. But for me, that whole opportunity to do something that I really enjoy as a human here on Earth and take that to space with me, to that really, I don't know, extraordinary place, and use it as a way to help communicate what I was experiencing, and then later to try to do that with broader audiences, where I think all of us on this session believe that art, it's just a universal communicator. You can engage with audiences that might not have thought they cared or even known that there's an International Space Station, that we're planning to go back to the moon, that we're looking towards humans settling Mars and expanding our place in the universe. And art allows us to do that very creatively and effectively and meaningfully, I believe. And then because of that whole love of art myself, creating art in space, I've been part of this organization called Space for Art Foundation, where Christina shared our mission is to unite a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. So space-themed art therapy. It's incredible to see how kids going what you hope is the worst thing they'll ever have to go through in their lives, be inspired by space, and then be creating something and able to think about a positive future for themselves because of that. And I think there's a synergy, a really beautiful synergy with the work I get to do with Jancy and the SciArt Exchange. We try to bring these two things together as much as we possibly can. And I think that across the four of us, that's going to continue to happen as well. So I will. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you. And of course, in the room we have Dr. Cyan Proctor, who you all got to hear from before this panel. But did they introduce you in all the things that you do? If not, I will. Okay. Cyan Proctor is a geoscientist, science communicator, and a SpaceX astronaut, which is awesome because this is the future SpaceX astronaut, best known for her mission Inspiration 4, where she was the 4th Black woman ever to go to space and the 1st Black woman ever to be a mission pilot, which is awesome. She also did art in space, and we actually have a slide I want to show, but she also believes in a Jedi space, a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive space. And we have a shared purpose of that, of promoting inclusivity and diversity in space and trying to welcome more and more people into space. So I'll let you speak. And there is one image I wanted to show that we had on a slide of Cyan, one of her paintings in space.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate to have won my seat to space as an artist and a poet, and to kind of go and have this experience. I've been a geoscientist for over 20 years, teaching at South Mountain Community College in Phoenix, Arizona. And but space, kind of on the side, I was always chasing space. And I tried to be a NASA astronaut in 2009 and came really close, down to that yes/no phone call. And I did that, I applied as a geoscientist and a teacher, an educator. And so when Inspiration 4 came along, I became an artist and a poet really during, or I should say it emerged out of me during COVID. And I know for a lot of people, when we went into lockdown in 2020, we found new ways of expressing our creativity, whether it was baking sourdough bread. I can't eat gluten, so I couldn't do that. Or cooking, or picking up a musical instrument. And for me, it was picking up art supplies for the first time and really kind of like thinking about poetry and words that I could use to express how I was feeling. And it just kind of came together that I'd started it in 2020, and by the time the Inspiration 4 mission came along and I had to create a Twitter video expressing why they should pick me for the prosperity seat, I decided that I would do it as an artist and a poet, and writing an original poem called My Space to Inspire, and hoping that it would resonate, but then to actually get selected to go on this, this all-civilian mission to orbit. And then once I knew I was going to be doing that, to think about, well, if I'm going to go as an artist and a poet, what does that mean? And thankfully, the way had been paved already for me by people like Nicole. And I remember having this conversation with SpaceX when I said that I wanted to bring watercolors to space in the Crew Dragon capsule. And they were like, what? You want to bring watercolors? I think they saw paint everywhere. And they, at first, they were like, I don't think that we're going to be able to do this. And I said, no, there's precedents that, I wouldn't be the first. Nicole had paved the way for me, and I showed them what she had done. And then they were like, yeah, okay, we're going to figure this out for you so that you can be able to do that. And so it was one of those great experiences of my life to have been able to put together that image that they showed a minute ago. It's my Afro Gaia, Mother Earth image, painting, I should say, where I drew it and I painted it all while I was in the Dragon capsule. And it's this idea that, solving for space solves for Earth, and that Afro Gaia, Mother Earth, is watching. Are we going to be a good steward? Are we going to do our due diligence for our most precious commodity, which is our planet, as we go off to explore the moon, Mars, and beyond? And I feel like because I found my authentic voice as an artist and poet, I'm able to bring together these ideas and these concepts of a Jedi space, just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive, of, what does that mean when it comes to not only us in humanity getting along, but also when we talk about that environmental justice component. And that's what a lot of my art focuses in, that lens and Afrofuturism.
Well, that's awesome. And so obviously I work with astronauts. I'm the astronaut Wrangler. But before I did all of that, I was a professional singer who toured all over the world. I was in a family band growing up, and then went to LA to become a rock star, and then ended up working for the rock star of astronauts, Buzz Aldrin. I always say this was not the plan for my life, to be in space. But I also always had a love for space, and until I fell into this, I had no idea that there was room for someone like me in space. I would never have thought that I could work in space. And I think that's what stops a lot of people. And I think partly why we want to use the power of art and music and other mediums is to remind people you don't have to be a scientist, an engineer, or someone deeply technical. There are so many ways that you can be a part of the space ecosystem. But even beyond that, the thing is it doesn't matter. Even if you can be part of inspiring people to care about space, is such a powerful thing. And I don't think it's a hard thing to convince people of. I just think that we need to do a better job of communicating it. And so I bring this up because I'm very passionate also about doing big art projects. I don't know if they showed so this is my Aim Higher project that I did back in October for World Space Week and International Day of the Girl. This is a 7,000 square foot giant eco-friendly grass portrait that I commissioned a crop artist to make of astronaut Stephanie Wilson. That portrait's made out of grass, mulch, sand, dirt, and the frame around it is, and then the Aim Higher hashtag, are 1,500 pieces of kids' space art from the city of Atlanta. Partnered with 14 public schools in the Atlanta region, and Nicole helped get kids from 3 Atlanta hospitals. Nicole and Cyan and astronaut Susan Kilrain all came, and not only did they show up and help me unveil this thing, but they actually helped me lay down the tile that you're seeing there on the ground. And the whole point of this was, I think that seeing an image in giant form to get people's attention and hopefully inspire young kids who think, wow, that girl looks like me. And what I'm trying to do using this kind of art also is hopefully to get people to realize, wow, that's a real person. Stephanie Wilson is the second black woman to go to space, has the most days in space of any black woman, went to space 3 times. Now, of course, Jessica Watkins is going to surpass her in days, but she still has such an important history and role in NASA. She's still a NASA astronaut and an Artemis astronaut. So I believe in using the power of art in giant form to hopefully get people's attention, and then hopefully partner with different organizations, schools and colleges to guide people to the possibilities of a career pathway into space. And so you can take that, that image away. But I just wanted to explain, we all come from different backgrounds. I'm a singer, musician, producer. You're a geoscientist and a teacher. Nicole's an engineer and was an astronaut. And then, of course, Jancy's a scientist. So we come from very different backgrounds, but we all have this united front of art. So I guess, you explained how you found your way to art, but I guess I'd like to hear from Jancy, like what made you decide as a scientist that this was a valuable thing to contribute to what you do?
So I think the really important thing is that my life was surrounded by the arts, and I therefore always appreciated that they had an inherent power and value, and just the process of, since we were doing performance art largely, like you, Christina, there's a lot that you learn from working in the arts and dealing with lots of different people. And so, to be quite honest, ending up where I am today was not an intentional plan. I think it was a little bit like yours, Christina. There was actually a light bulb moment. I mean, I can remember what that moment was. I was sitting on a scientific planning committee for a scientific conference, and the chief scientist at that time decided that it would, the theme of the conference would be the next golden age of human space exploration. And for some reason, all the parts of who I am and all my experience went like this. And I thought, well, we need to really do a better job bringing in what was, at that time, the children to be thinking about the next golden age. So how do I bring children into a high-level scientific conference? What can be an international language? Because I'd really like us to explore as one human race. And it just seemed reasonable to me that art was the right format, because it's a language that everybody can relate to. There are cultural aspects to it, but everyone can respond to it, especially if you include multimedia, because not everybody responds to the same format of artwork. So it was just like that slide I showed you of creativity was a synthesis of everything, and it was not intentional.
Well, Nicole, I mean, you are known now for the Space for Art Foundation, but like, what gave you the idea to do this, to do what you're doing with children? Oh, she's muted.
It's all that technical stuff I have so much trouble with. So, like all of you are saying, I don't think there was any master plan for it, right? For me, I think there wasn't a light bulb moment also, like Jancy mentioned. I had done this painting in space. I was thinking about retiring from NASA and wanting to, I don't know, meaningfully, thoughtfully share the experience I'd had in space, and how everything we're doing there is ultimately about improving life on Earth. People should know about this space station, and that for 20 years we've had these, this international partnership between 5 space agencies and over 15 countries working peacefully, successfully together. And I just felt like, man, my art could be a way to help communicate that, perhaps to audiences that wouldn't have otherwise thought of it. And then was very fortunate to get invited to participate in a project that somebody else, this artist, Sian, had started down at one of the pediatric cancer centers in Houston with kids. He had also started their art and medicine program there, and he wanted to do something related to space. Now, he thought the ultimate thing would be for him to be the artist in residence on the space station, but we had to talk him down a little bit, and I think actually, I hope he would agree, though I think he probably would still want to go to space, that what's come of this has been even more meaningful than him having the chance to fly in space. is bringing these kids together with their artwork when they're going through a challenge that's so like life-changing already, life-threatening, you know, for them, and providing them with a way to think positively about their future. And I thought I'd just come in and paint with these kids a couple times, you know, participate in some of the stuff he was doing at that hospital. And I think it was the second session with kids there in Houston. And I have that picture on that slide. It's the one with the little girl and she's pointing up to the sky. And I remember that was my light bulb moment. Like, holy moly. I really believe I got to go to space so I could come back to Earth and work with these kids on these projects, bringing kids all, you know, from all over the world together and allowing them to create their own little piece of art that becomes part of something bigger. And then allows them to further understand this connection between personal and planetary health that we all need to understand as well, right? This idea of behaving like a crewmate and not a passenger, it all just seems to fit so naturally into these interactions with these kids, us with them with each other, and what's represented by this like global community art project that comes together from it. Some of which we've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to fly to space. So again, it's why I think there's so much synergy with what all of us are doing. Is there's these overlaps, and one of those Venn diagrams, you know, that you had, Jancy, we could overlap what all four of us are doing, and that there's that beautiful center in the middle of space and art and science coming together to allow really, I mean, really amazing things to happen.
That's one of the things I love the most, actually, is that we all have our own organizations, but they can absolutely work together and partner. You know, it's not a competition. We could actually find ways to do things together. You know, one of the things that I had heard, Joanne Morgan was the first female engineer at Kennedy Space Center, and she told me that her father, who was the head of the ballistic missile program, he had made all of his children pick an instrument. They had to learn an instrument because he felt that that was the best preparation for them to be able to be good engineers or good scientists or whatever they wanted to do. And then there was a story I saw with John Glenn. Someone asked him what made him such a good pilot, and he said playing piano. And so I think, you know, there's something that's gotten lost a little bit. You know, sometimes I've said this thing, and I know it's controversial, but there are times where I feel like the STEM movement was a mistake. And the reason I bring that up is because I think it sends a message to young people that if you're not good at science and technology and engineering, if you're not a numbers person, then you're not valuable to society. And I think that that's a huge mistake, because people are much more multifaceted than that. You know, as Jancy told me she did, you guys came up with this together, Nicole. Why can't you use your whole brain, not just part of your brain? And I think that that's something we have to get back to, and I think they were so good at the days of Apollo, is the branding, the marketing, the inspiration part of it. You know, everybody's fed so much information, and so there's so much focus on education and information that people are forgetting the inspiration part, which is what makes people want to be a part of it, seeing art, hearing music, and all of that. So, you know, I think that we're all joined in that purpose, and there's a lot that we can do together. And, you know, obviously, and I don't know when I'm supposed to start this Q&A portion, so somebody flag me down when we get there. But, you know, we all obviously, you know, I think we're all pretty much space cadets. We love, like, sci-fi and all of that. You know, so I'll start with Cyan again. Like, you know, obviously space travel, science fiction, Star Trek, Star Wars, all of that is intertwined. I mean, do you think, I have a tagline now that I say that I'm trying to guide or connect the space curious to the space serious. So obviously, lots of people love sci-fi and Star Wars and things that are science, you know, fantasy, science fiction. How can we use that to get more people in? Do you think that that's a good tool to kind of invite people in?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you were to survey all of the space community, even just in here, how many of you are sci-fi and sci-fantasy, science fiction fans? You know,
really, it's not all the hands. That surprised me.
Because that's what drew us into wanting to be an astronaut, wanting to build rockets and to explore beyond. And I think that is driven a lot of the technology that we've seen coming out of some of the leading companies these days is that they had a vision. They had experience with their imagination of the impossible becoming possible through science fiction and fantasy and those genres. And I know for me, Star Trek, early age, watching the reruns with my dad, and seeing Lieutenant Uhura, Nichelle Nichols, and because there were no black female astronauts, that Jedi space. But they made me. Star Trek is where, it's a Star Wars, do we have to choose between Star Wars and Star Trek? No, we can have both.
Yes.
We can have a Star Trek vision of the future where we're boldly going together as a diverse representation by creating that Jedi space. And that was the first time that I got to experience that, was through Star Trek, and thinking, wow, I want to trek across the universe and explore new places, boldly go.
Yeah, and I know, Nicole, you guys are pretty big Trekkies in your house, right?
Yeah, we are. I think COVID time frame allowed us to watch every series, from start to finish again. But yeah, I actually live with the person I would call the planetary expert on all things sci-fi. But it's really awesome because, just like you were talking about, Cyan, it's really this idea of, ultimately through that inspiration, that's how do we bring that sci-fi to sci-fact? Bring these things to life. This thing, holy moly, that was part of science fiction, science fantasy. What we're doing right now, Jancy and I able to participate in this this forum, these things in our daily lives that we just imagined at one point, and now we're actually living them. It's really, really cool. And so I cannot wait to see what my son, who's 20 years old now, when he's 60, like I am, what kind of life are they going to be living? What kind of fantastical things are going to come to pass? And I love that you mentioned the whole brain thing. Oh my gosh, Jancy and I talk about that all the time. And when you look at the four of us, I imagine, I can't see the audience, but I imagine there's, within the audience too, it's a pretty high percentage, if not all, people who have some blend of creativity and technical things going on, whether they consider themselves, more an artist, creative person. There's technical aspects of that as well, and then the other way around. And I can tell you, pretty much every astronaut I know has some creative outlet. That even ones that Jancy, that there's this creativity. It comes through in different ways. It might be movement, it might be, building something, or it might be more traditional. But I think there's a really wonderful blend in all of us, if we'll acknowledge it.
How about you, Jancy? Are you one of these sci-fi freaks like the rest of us?
Well, I think I've watched every episode of Star Trek at least 5 times. So, definitely. And
she has the outfit.
Yeah, that's true. I just remembered that.
And what's really funny is that sometimes that image, somehow it's made it on the internet, and sometimes that image comes back to haunt me in some of the less savory moments. So it's pretty funny. But I was definitely influenced by science fiction and wanted to live that life, wanted to be a part of that. I also use an example of an image from 2001: A Space Odyssey in my talk, because that rotating spacecraft has never existed, and I spent 10 years of my life studying whether we could use artificial gravity to help support our future in space exploration. And that reminds me of the fact that art kind of really helps them by capturing ideas and then suggesting real solutions. So, there's a lot going on there. So the science fiction, the science art, all of that can inspire and also help us get where we want to go and know why we're doing it.
Yeah, it's funny because I had William Shatner recorded a video for one of the Apollo galas that I produced. He couldn't come in person. And as I was researching it, I saw, and I didn't know this because I wasn't alive yet, but that Star Trek was out before Apollo 11 landed on the moon. And so, so that was really interesting to see like how much had already been visualized and thought of, and just the dreamers dreaming up all of these possibilities of space. And then a year and a half later, we landed on the moon. And so in that thing with William Shatner, he said, "Oh, pray tell, Buzz, I made it to space before you," you know? And so
we're still looking for that tricorder.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, like how now, you know, like you say, science fact, a lot of what was science fiction, or, you know, science projection is what Buzz used to call it. But
well, you know, based on what you were saying, Nicole, about, you know, art and science, and, you know, that there's science and art, and there's art and science. And when we think back to the Renaissance, my call sign is Leo. And the reason why my crew members gave me that call sign is that they considered me a modern day Leonardo da Vinci. You know, historically, science and art were melded together. You know, when you talk about having that, what a Renaissance person was about was learning the arts and sciences in sync with each other. And then, you know, as time came along and the formal educational system went out and to the masses, you know, you got separated and tracked into these two different things, when we're really more complex than that. We're so multifaceted, and that's one of the things that I'm really interested in, is how do we bring that back together? How do we talk about, you know, the modern Renaissance person and what that means for us if we're going to the moon, Mars, and beyond? Because I think we need a problem-solving person who is using their whole brain in creative, interesting ways. The Martian was an excellent example of that, science fiction, but that type of person, when people say, "Oh, who would you want as your crew member going with you to Mars?" I'm like, Mark Watney. I want to take that dude, you know? And so this whole idea of having that creativity, the imagination, but also the science and technical aspects. How do we create that generation of explorers who just embraces that whole brain mentality along with lifelong learning?
Yeah, I love that you say that, Cyan, because, you know, especially with respect to like the educational system, and Jancy and I also have this conversation about this Renaissance aspect of learning and education. But I think it's funny that I think pretty much every university you go to has the College of Arts and Sciences. Mm-hmm. And yet there's like these, even within that, there's no blend. It's like these totally separate paths. And maybe if we could figure out a way to like bring that back together, even within the educational system, and at that high level, university level of education, it would be, I mean, can you imagine? I think every class that our kids attend could have a space and an art aspect to it as well. Mm-hmm. I don't care if it's math or geophysics or neuroscience. I mean, there's a way to incorporate a space and art theme in every single one of them.
And of course, sorry, no, go ahead, Jancy.
Yeah, and I get asked a lot at space science and technology events, how do I foster Johnny's or Jane's interest in wanting to go to space? And I always surprise them, because I tell them to put them in summer musical theater camp and dance lessons and music, and they all think I'm going to tell them, you know, something much more expected, like how to code and robotics camp and all that. And those are all excellent things too. But we need to have that broader experience base. That's how we make ourselves able to be creative.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to add, and they told me 5 minutes. I don't know if that means when we have to be completely done, but what I was going to say is I went to China several times with Buzz Aldrin, and for complicated reasons, NASA people cannot go to China and talk to them, but The reason I bring that up, though, is because Yang Liwei, who's the head of the Chinese human spaceflight program, had said to us, look, we do not promote creative thinking in our culture. We're very good at taking a technical thing and copying it and improving it, but we don't promote creative thinking or opening up possibilities, and that's what we need to learn from the West. I worry all the time that we're going to lose that, and we've got to really promote letting people, create things, think differently, not have to do everything by a certain standard. Every kid is different. And I think that, I'm very lucky. My kids go to a STEAM school, including the arts, in Florida. And so I'm very grateful for that, because they have art and music classes. But it's still missing in a lot of schools. So I hope at some point we can get that back. I see you back there, Janet. What am I doing?
You've got time for a couple of questions.
Okay. Anybody want to ask us a question? Got somebody up here in the front. Come on up. I think that mic is not on. There we go.
Now we go. Jancy, it's nice to see you. I'm a host of a podcast called What the If, and we've had Jancy on, and we took a scenario. We said, what if a scientist and an artist were trapped in an elevator together? What would be that conversation? And we had a great discussion. It's interesting that so much of your energy is, I know the actual work you do with in the public and with children isn't consumed by this, but so much of the discussion is consumed about this polarity, science versus art. Can you see us getting beyond that, where it doesn't have to be so front-loaded? Part of the discussion is just naturally things, they have become much more integrated in our culture. How long do you think that might take?
Well, I'll just jump in real quick, which is that I've been to a lot of space conferences. And there aren't that many. I mean, there's sometimes an art thing off to the side that's not front and center. I would love to see something that's much more front and center, and make that a more featured thing instead of just kind of an add-on. That's me.
Yeah, I would say that, if you say how long it would take, well, the Renaissance was what, 400 years ago? Well, I think about, if we actively try to meld these things back together, then we can do it. And but I'm seeing it go in that direction. I'm associated with Arizona State University, where they have the Center for Science and the Imagination, and this whole idea of more interdisciplinary and mixing of mixed media along with the engineering departments and really interesting things. So the conversation is definitely swinging back toward this idea of interdisciplinary, that diversity needed, where you're taking not just the scientists and the engineers, but you're adding in the artists and the aesthetics. I even saw that with the SpaceX and the Dragon capsule with our spacesuits, things like that, where they not only wanted to have function, but they also wanted the aesthetic components to be there, and saw the importance of that. That you weren't just going to be needing a capsule that was going to take you to space, but that humans were actually going to be living in this space. And so SpaceX, I feel, does a really good job of thinking about that. And I think that, we're going to see just more of that in the future as we get these new stations up in orbit and people coming and the experience that we're going to have as we go to the moon, Mars, and beyond.
So we're almost out of time. We've got a young lady right here who wants to get up and ask a question. So we're gonna take her. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Is her mic on? Okay, I think your mic might be on. It's okay.
I don't think we're still hearing you.
Don't be shy.
Wait, let's bring it.
Yeah, maybe a different mic. It's a little girl. I don't know if you guys can see Nicole and Jancy.
I have a question for Dr. Cyan Proctor.
Can you talk a little bit louder?
You have a question for Dr. Cyan Proctor. Go ahead.
What is your favorite picture you made in space?
What is your favorite picture you made in space? Thank you.
know-
Well done. Good job.
That is such a great question. I got the opportunity to draw a dragon in space and to paint this watercolor. And it's a tough call because the dragon was something that I've drawn my entire life. It was the one thing, so it's kind of ironic that I took a dragon to space. But then if we bring up that image of my Afro-Gaia, the opportunity to kind of like create this this idea, this image of from space using metallic paints and stuff. Oh, I don't know if they've got it. They're trying to get it up.
They're trying.
That
No, not
is
that
my
one.
favorite thing
There
right
we
there. And so what do you think of it? Do you like that with the colors and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. And so I just am so happy that it turned out so well because I was very nervous. And I'm sure, Nicole, you might have been just as nervous as I was, like, is this going to work out all right? But I'm very happy that I was able to do that. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.